Alex.
Yes, sir. How are you? Welcome to Focus on Liberia. My name is Alex Jones, and this is
Gabriel Carter.
And today you're on the Business and Economic Forum Marketplace, Focus on Liberia, where we discuss business, economics, finance, budget, you name it. Again, happy that you can join us today, and we'll be taking some of your financial and economic questions as the show proceeds. But today we'll be talking to Mr. Carter, I believe, on a lot of the budget, the new supplemental budget, or the recast budget, some people may call it that, which runs from, I think, May to December. And we'll be critiquing the budget. So if you have your questions, please call. And this time I'll turn it over to my man, Carter. How are you, Carter? How's it been?
How have I been? Thank you. Again, thank you for having me on the, it's been a while, actually.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I've been great, actually. A lot of things happening, but it feels good to be back on the show to really talk about the budget. This is something we don't talk about a lot. I think when it first came out, we probably did a couple of shows on that, right?
Right.
Yeah, if I'm wrong, right. So this segment is actually a deep dive into breaking down the numbers, making sense of it, and really getting a good understanding of what the budget is, right? You know, the expenses, the revenue coming in, the expenses, the allocations, and also critiquing what we think, you know, improvement can be made to really get a good return for the buck, if you will. So this is what we're going to be talking about. Again, as always, I like the show to be interactive. So ask your question, prepare your questions, ask your question, call in. We will be taking calls and be reading comments. Again, we don't present ourselves to know it all here. So keep us honest where you think we might be wrong, and challenge us where you think we might be wrong. And we look forward to having a good interactive show. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, again, it's been a while since we've done one of these. We also will hopefully be doing this every weekend on Saturday, 3:00, same place, same time. And we'll have other guests. Hopefully we'll have guests from different political parties. As you know, it's a political season and the budget is a big discussion. We'll also be looking for their alternative budget, what they would be doing if they were in power, what they are proposing. So again, it should come along very well.
Yeah.
By the way, you haven't shown up in Boston for the golf game, so
I owe you that. I will actually. I'm practicing my swing. The last time we showed up there, you actually schooled me a little bit. So I got to come back good. So
give congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
I'm not gonna name the particular firm, but
you're
doing very well. I mean, they're like the top two now, right? Top three.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. So how's New York treating you?
It's great, my man. I can't complain. I cannot complain. I can't complain at all.
I kind of miss New York in a special way. And I missed it. As you all know, I worked in New York for many, many years on Wall Street, and lived all parts of New York, from Long Beach to Jersey City to Manhattan. It's a vibrant city. I don't know how it is right now, but I haven't been there in a while. Look forward to coming and visit you so we can go uptown, you uptown.
But without getting too much into that, let's get into the show, my man.
Okay, all right.
I don't want us to get bored,
All right. So Gabriel, all right, there's been a lot of discussion about the budget.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, it's been the only economic discussion, the budget. Somehow our finance ministers believe that their only job as finance ministers is to propose a budget, which to me is one of the least things the finance minister should be fixated with. You have regulatory issues, banking issues in Liberia. The banks, of course, is a big problem. You don't have a lot of Liberians managing any banks in Liberia. You have a serious deflation issue, which nobody's talking about.
Yep. We
Yeah,
will cover that a little bit. Yeah.
We'll cover that a little bit.
Yeah.
You also have, again, a low GDP.
Yep.
You have unemployment, high unemployment. I would say 90% in Liberia's unemployment. They can't even calculate the unemployment number. That's how bad it's been. You have high interest rates.
Yep.
So basically, you have all these problems. And the only thing Samuel Tuer knows to talk about is the budget. Is he, is this deliberate or is just naivety that he doesn't know or incapable of? Before we get into the budget, first of all, I just want to know your perspective.
So right off the bat, without trying to get into the budget, honestly, I think it's just naivete, right? I don't think he knows what he's doing. I will leave it as that. I think it's just naivete.
Okay, so he doesn't know that
his role, first of all.
Yeah, his role as a financial planner.
Right.
At analyzing the country, decentralizing the economy, managing, fiscal policies, investments, national investments, sovereign wealth fund, return on the national asset and national investments. None of those things are part of his, his horizon. Budget. So since you want us to talk about the budget, because I heard him post about it. So let's talk about the budget.
Yeah. So technically,
your budget.
So technically, what is a budget, right? A budget is pretty much a forecast, right, of a point in time. So you can make a budget for about a month. You can make a budget based on 6 months, basically on a year. And you can make a budget about anything. You can have a personal budget. A company has a budget. Government have budgets. Fortunately for us, we're going to be discussing the budget for Liberia, right? This is what it is. In this case, typically it's a 12-month period, right? Some do the typical January to December. Some countries start in the middle, from June to June or June to July. So typically what a budget is, it measure a point in time. You give a projection of, say, I'm going to buy a cup of tea for next year. I'm going to buy, say, 5 bags of rice next year for $50 a bag of rice, right? Now, that's your estimation. Come next year at that time, during the year, the price of rice could go up. You could end up spending it more, or you could end up falling within that budget that you prepare for yourself. So typically, as a budget is a thing that actually keep you honest about your finances. So in this case, for the country Liberia, we're just looking at how it collects its money and how it spends its money and the things that it actually spends its money on. So typically, this is what a budget is. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay. So the budget currently we're talking about is from, I believe, June to December?
Yeah, so they actually is a special budget, right?
Okay.
I think they first released it in July, if I'm not mistaken, either July or June, right? And I think it went to the Senate, right? But I don't think anybody pushed back on it because I didn't.
It says July 1st to December 31st.
Yes.
So yes, for that period. All right.
Yeah. And nobody pushed back on it. So when it first got released, I think that's when we actually talked about it, right? And nobody pushed back on it in terms of to say, hey, this allocation for such and such figures should be adjusted, or you should move some money around to such and such places, or this amount of compensation that is being allocated for these representatives should not be this high. It wasn't any pushback at all. The last thing we hear is I think it got passed through the the Senate, right? And now it's about to get signed by the it's about to go in effect, right? And nobody has talked about this. Nobody. I think the only people that covered it was you and I and Walu, and I think Dr. Gompo, if I'm not, keep me honest if I'm wrong, that did a probably 2 or 3, 4 segment on this budget. So now we're back at it again to really do a deep dive into it. So yeah.
Okay. Is it that people don't understand it? If I say people, I mean people in our political circles, the people who are the talking heads, the people who claim to be running political parties, people who claim to be, right.
Budgets are complicated. I mean, you and I, we do numbers. We play with numbers every day. Numbers are not numbers are complex, and not a lot of people like dealing with numbers, right?
But how are you going to run a country if you can't? You want to deal with numbers, because the idea of running the country is about managing numbers.
Touche, right?
Whether it's managing mortality rates, that's a number. Unemployment, that's a number.
I agree with
that's
you.
a number. So tell me how we can have all these, political parties, all these politicians, and nobody will talk about the actual thing that matters, which is how people's lives are doing in terms of their basic human development.
Yeah, touche. I agree with you. Technically, this is the cream of the crop of a country. This is the meats and bounds of what moves the country. And I think if any political party, I don't care who you are, whether you want to dabble your foot in politics or whatever, you have to have a gross on. We don't want expert understanding of the budget, just a gross understanding of it, right? A talking point, right? So we don't expect that. But I think the reason why most people don't talk about the budget, as I said, numbers are complex. Interpreting numbers, you can put a data in front of somebody, interpreting those data is a whole new ball game. So I think the reason why you don't hear a lot of people talking about the budget is, one, they don't understand it. Two, they don't know how to interpret those numbers or what it means, right? And this is why a lot of people don't talk about it. And this is why I think why you and I and Dr. Gumpu and Dwalu actually do to talk about this. The budget is a good thing because it brings a lot of people around. I don't know if you want to call it fear, to say, okay, I really wanted to talk about this thing, but there's certain places I don't understand. At least I have a group of people that can make sense of it and really answer my questions if I have any questions about it. So I think the reason people don't talk about it, one, they don't understand it. Two, interpreting a huge amount of data. The budget itself is 473 pages. That is a book within itself, right?
Right.
Going through all that thing. The reason why I said it, because I geeked out this thing day in, day out, right? It's 473 pages. Going through it takes a lot. Making sense of the numbers that were allocated here and there and what it means takes a lot of work. This is why people don't talk about it. But I think they should be talking about it. It should be the meats and bounds of any political party. That should be your talking point.
Absolutely.
Fix it.
Absolutely. And by the way, I mean, speaking about that, do we, the central bank, which is one of the key managers of the economy, we haven't heard Talu speak about the budget. The central bank manager, I mean, a governor, like he has not held any press conferences, as you know. The central bank governor is the only person who should be talking about things like monetary policy, which is inflation. About Samuel Toure running a mouth every day. The man doesn't even know his job. The Minister of Finance job is not to talk about monetary policy. It's to talk about fiscal policy. Difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy talks about the economy, the interest rates, talk about the inflation rate and so economic policy. Fiscal policy talks about the budget, the government management. Did they manage the country's resources better last year compared to this year? Where are the investments they're going to be making? How are they going to handle foreign direct investment? How much more money is going to come into the country and things like that? So it's like those duos, they don't know what they're doing. One person taking the other person's job and the other person completely quiet. Why haven't we heard a central bank governor in a press conference? Why haven't we seen our central bank governor host an economic discussion?
So I think that there's two things that's happening there, right? One, the only time I think I've seen this twice, I've seen him, I've heard him make, I think, press conference. One was actually, I think, in the Senate. It wasn't even a press conference. It was in the Senate. I think he was debating the enforcing, giving reason why, justifying why they needed to print money. Those are the two times. And the first one was actually when he got appointed. So the reason why I think you don't see the central bank governor in press, talking about the economy, it's one thing. I think he's just what we call a lame duck. Somebody you just put in place just as a placeholder.
You mean a figurehead? So you
Yeah, a
just
figurehead, right? A
right.
figurehead.
Okay.
So you just put him in there just for being in there. Then you tell him, "Oh, keep your mouth shut. The rest of this thing, we're going to do it, right?" And this is why you see most of the time you see Samuel Twer coming out and talking about things regarding the central bank. But I agree with you, right? The fiscal aspect of it is what Samuel Twer is supposed to be talking about. The monetary aspect of it is what I forgot his name. The central bank governor is supposed to be talking about, right? But they're kind of having this mix of roles, and it's causing a problem within. For those who pay attention to those things, like you and I, it kind of, you would clearly see that there's a miscommunication here of duty, right? Responsibilities and your duties, or understanding what you're supposed to be talking about. What Samuel Toy is supposed to be talking about, like you said, is fiscal policy, right? How do you increase the tax base, right? What kind of tax revenue do you look at? Do you look at taxing people on income? Do you look at real estate taxes? Do you look at excise taxes on vehicles and all of those things? How to grow your tax revenue base and make it easy for businesses to pay taxes, right? With the central bank governor, I think they think he's supposed to be talking about is, how do we control for inflation, right? How do we control for inflation?
And let me just say, it was so funny that when I listened to the discussion, I had this program where Twer went, and I don't mean to be personal on Twer, but Twer is the Minister of Finance. He's responsible. He's accountable.
Right.
The Liberians out there, it's not, if Carter was the finance minister, the same thing I'm saying about Twer, I would be saying about Carter if Carter wasn't doing that.
Absolutely.
Samuel Twer does not understand the difference between inflation and deflation. And that is troubling. So he's taking deflationary situation and making it as if Liberia economy is vibrant. You have a negative 3% GDP growth.
Yeah.
Okay. Even if the GDP were 2%, it would still be bad. And I will tell you why in a minute. Because there are countries in Africa, West Africa, all from coronavirus are growing 5-6%.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why the inflation rate fell is not because of any special policy or any kind of effort. Because they printed more money, obviously. So that shouldn't have. The reason is the economy has slowed in Liberia.
Yeah.
There is no growth in Liberia. Yep. Prices have come down drastically in key commodities.
Yep.
Okay. That's deflation.
Yep.
That is bad. The consumer price index has fallen. So because the inflation rate has fell, it doesn't mean that, the country is doing better now.
Yeah.
Okay? In fact, the inflation in the Irish in West Africa are probably around 5%. Even here, with all of the stimulus, right? The 10-year bond is down to what, 120 something, when it should be around 2%.
Two over, yeah.
Okay, so all these years, the people have been trying to fight deflation because of the slowdown. So there's nothing to boast about. The country has come from, almost hyperinflation now to deflation in a matter of 2-3 months because there is no growth.
Right.
That's not something that's what needs to be controlled. And part of the reason, there is no investment. There is no enough stimulus. There is low employment. So there's no circulation of money into the country. So you're having a deflationary problem, which will go into the budget, and you will see that how the revenue has declined.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out. But
No,
before we start to work, why hasn't the other political parties speak on things like the budget? Why haven't they, taken the leadership to educate Liberians about these things?
I agree with you. That would be that. I think it's a problem with our body of politics. That's the biggest problem with our body of politics, right? The things that we should be talking about, we don't talk about them, right? The non-important things are what we take and expand them and make them talking points. Every country, in order to have stability there, you have to have a sound, what we call, from, if you're looking at it from a country standpoint, a company standpoint, you have to have sound management at the top, right? Now, if you are somebody who's running to be, let's say, president, and you have this kind of budget. The budget is just screaming. When you go through the budget, it screams, talk about me, talk about me. This isn't right. This isn't right. But nobody is taking that accountability or the leadership role to say these are important. How can we have this? Matter of fact, if I were running and I saw this budget, I would right away, if I had my team already, my economic team, the first thing I would do, I would say, hey, I want an economic plan with a prospective budget that is better than what we have out already, right? And I will use that prospective budget to be a talking point of how my budget will be improvement to the one that's already in existence, right? And this is how you sell your platform. But again, politics in Liberia is kind of it kind of make you squeamish, right? You kind of scratch your head, if you will, right? Like when you look at it. But long story short, to answer the question, I don't see a reason why they're not doing that. I don't see a reason why they're not talking about it. Let me talk about the macroeconomics part of the budget first. When it first came out, I think we talked about it, right? I think you highlighted most of the things that I want to talk about. The contraction in 2020, right? -3%, right? From their projection and assertion was that it happened mostly in the rubber and iron ore sector industry, which is right because there was, the commodity prices on the global market. I agree with them on that.
Yeah, but the rubber and commodity prices were high last year. They were the highest. It's steel price, iron ore price.
I'm getting to my point here. I'm getting to my point here, right? And the key point that I'm getting to, I will get to later, is data integrity, right? So in addition to that, they said 40% of the economy, right? The service sector, which is 40% of our economy, was in stagnation, right? Because of the pandemic, right? There's a shortage of Liberian dollar, right? Which I don't know how that is true when they already printed money. In addition to that, finally, it said they're projecting the economy to grow 3.5%. Let me make this simple. Number line, right? There's the negative side and there's the positive side. So let's say you have -3%. In order to have 3.5% growth, you need to grow 6% to get 6.5% in order to get to 3.5%, right?
Right.
And this is what they're projecting. And nobody questioned that. Like, hey, this number you're putting out doesn't make sense. If we're coming from -3% to get to 3.5%, we have to grow 6.5% to get to that 3.5%, right? The last point that I want to make here before I yield: data integrity. You mentioned the contraction in the rubber sector. It was high, right, last year, but they're saying that it was low. That's the reason why part of the contraction happened. So there's what I call data integrity point. The data that goes into this budget, we're questioning the source of the integrity of the data that goes into the source of this budget, right? We're not just looking at the budget anymore. We're questioning what they're looking at to make these assertions in the budget, right? And these are just talking points. These are just talking points to counter, right? Let me expand on what is actually happening in the economy right now, right? We have the pandemic. It's disrupting supply chain. We know that, like, if you go around any store you go right now, the things are getting more expensive right now, right? That's because of the disruption in supply chain. The interest rate in Liberia is high. It's high. It's the exchange rate, actually, not interest rate. The exchange rate right now is $170 to $1. It's actually depreciated, right? Also, the Port Authority, they've just abandoned the BVA system to some whatever system they're using, but they're not using the BVA system anymore. I know people that ship and they're complaining about it because the cost is higher. You buy a car here for $5,000, you will ship it for $1,500 or $1,300. To clear it from the port will cost you almost $4,000. So people some people have the money to ship, and others, what they're doing, they're shipping their car to Guinea and bringing it into Liberia, right? All of those things have economic consequences. CPI, we know globally right now, well, let me not say globally. In the US, the CPI is actually higher, right? What does that mean for Liberia? Are we even looking at that? How do we even measure a basket of goods in Liberia? How does the central bank measure a basket of goods to say, oh, the inflation is higher or inflation is low? And this is the reason why I was questioning the data integrity. It's not about what you put out, but it's what goes into what you put out. And I think if anybody, any political party that is running for president in Liberia right now to run it to be, to lead the country, those are the things you should be questioning. Those are the things you should be looking at, right? And that's what I just wanted to say that before I yield.
Yeah. That's what I just like. Yeah, again, somebody just mentioned, made a comment about what that system. And that's very important. And why? Okay, so
you're breaking
when I reviewed it, I looked at this government's administration is in itself. It's putting Liberia in a worse situation. You mentioned people going to Guinea to clear that stuff because the government has brain debt. They have no way of raising revenue. Okay, the only means of raising revenue in Liberia, of course, is to kind of increase taxes on right? Increase tax, which also increases the prices of goods and services. That's why you have high inflation in the past. Okay, all right. But the problem now, because you've increased prices so high on basic, so people will scale down on the system. There's only so much money people have in the economy. Yep. So that's why the inflation rate is falling. So you don't have growth. What you have is a decrease in the purchasing power of the country. Low employment, low investment made over the previous years, right? And then now commodity prices, where you're depending on, has fallen. So if the GDP is projected, I know some IMF or some projection from somewhere which doesn't make any sense. If you have falling commodity prices in Liberia, most of the budget, all right, comes from commodities, raw material. How can you be projecting an increase in GDP?
Exactly.
Where's the increase? Where is that number going to come from? It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. I don't care if it comes from the IMF or the World Bank. Unless you're telling me that you're gonna have higher commodity prices over the next year, then you could say that okay, that will increase growth because that is where most of our growth is dependent upon. Economy. So I just wanted to make that point real quick. Now, because again, they don't have any investment made. I mean, practical investment in terms of manufacturing. I'm a big proponent of manufacturing. They use things which lower your importation. It strengthens your economy, and it provides jobs. So this government has been incapable of doing that because manufacturing takes time, it takes investment, it takes experts. You can't. If you're going to build a factory, you can't put Jefferson Coach to go run a factory when he may not even know how to read a freaking a memorandum. You need to find people who knows how to manage balance sheet, who knows how to grow economy. So what they're doing, they're just overtaxing the people. So they're getting little money to pay just $40 million or whatever amount, pay themselves and to build a few roads. So they're getting that money from borrowing, number one. And it's in the budget. This has added, I would say, maybe about $300 to $400 million in funds borrowed. That's the money, George, we are taking at a very, very high interest rate. I think it's about maybe 25% a year. So we're borrowing from Eco Bank, and it's in the budget. You're borrowing from Eco Bank, you're paying Nigerian business people 25%. So that you can go build a wall and win election. And then Liberia will be stuck with over $500 million a day in the next 2 to 3 years. And nobody's talking about that. So look at the debt. The debt increase.
I think we have a slide. I think we have a slide on the debt. If we can pull that slide up. We have a slide on the debt to really, I think it's on page. I can tell you right now, it is on. I think it's on page 4 of our slide. Right.
Look at it.
Further down.
Hey, Gabriel, just tell me the title. Is it on inflation, whatever it is?
It's on. Let me tell you right now. I'll tell you right now.
It's on revenue.
No, it's on. It's called. Okay, it's called debt maturity profile. Debt maturity profile.
All right.
It's a blue slide with blue heading. It captures exactly what we want to talk about. So that'll give us
right here. No.
There it is. Perfect. So thank you, Anthony. This is exactly what you're talking about here, Alex. Right, $1.5 billion in debt. Right, that is 48% of our GDP. Our GDP is just barely over 3 billion. Right, so 1.5 to divide by 3.5. I mean 3.5. Right, that's almost 48%. The interest rate, 17.3%. Right? Now look at what we call the grace period. Right? Grace period for those of you who have, if you have credit cards, right, is due either on the 30th or on the 1st of the month. If you don't pay then, you have a grace period. Sometimes they'll give you 15 days. The grace period the lowest grace period on our debt is 1.5 years. After that, whoever the creditor is can activate whatever covenant they have in their loan to now start collecting on whatever collateral you pledged for that loan that you took out. The highest is 15 years, right? And the 1.3 years, that is actually on the internal debt. The 15-year, that's to international partners, right? So exactly what Alex was saying. You look at the budget, you look at the debt low in the country, it has grown to $1.5 billion. We pay 12% of our revenue, right? $34 million every year just to service our debt, right? The reason why I like talking about this, I manage a $180 million portfolio, right? With a lot of companies in it, right? Let's put Liberia in the context of a company. I know a lot of people don't like doing that, but let's put Liberia in the context of a company, right? If this was a company coming back to me to say they wanted to borrow money, whether the earmark for infrastructure or the healthcare or whatever it is they wanted to use that money for, right? The first thing I'm going to look at is that, well, over 10 years ago or 15 years ago or how many years ago, right? You just went through bankruptcy. We just wiped out your entire debt, right? Within that span of a time, you have accumulated another $1.5 billion worth of debt. So what does that tell me? First of all, that's a red flag. You have no understanding of your how you manage your debt. That means you have no understanding of your finances. We just wiped out your debt. Now we're back up to $1.5 billion in debt. The next thing I'm going to look at to say, okay, debt is good. I know people frown upon debt, but debt is a good thing. But however, there are some bad debt. Is this a cheap debt or is it expensive debt? In the case of Liberia, this is an expensive debt compared to other countries where other countries are borrowing at, right? And the reason why people are not lending to people, the interest rate on that debt is too high because one, again, we're looking at the leadership, right? Who's in charge of the company? I mean, the country, right? What are the borrowing strength of the country, right? We don't have any credit rating. The biggest part of your revenue, entire country revenue, comes from taxes, right? Either taxes or you get it from concession, right? So your source of repayment on your debt are limited. So if I'm going to pledge money to you, what I'm going to do, I'm going to charge you that interest for taking that level of risk on you. This is why you see the interest rate on Liberia debt is at 17.3%, right? Now, as I said, if I were looking at this as a company, the next thing I'm going to look at, right, in that measurement metrics is that for every dollar you borrow, you have borrowed up to that $1.5 billion, right? How much are you investing and how much are you getting on that investment that you're making? So we call it capital deployed and return on equity, return on capital deployed, right? So if you have a $1.5 billion debt and you're only spending $29 million on infrastructure, and on that $29 million you're spending, you're not making money. You come to no country, no sovereign wealth fund, no international partner will want to even look at you. Not even your own citizen, if you even try to raise debt on the bond, to use bond to raise debt, right? They were not even going to look at you. If you even, I know some point last year we tried talking about raising debt on the international market. People, it didn't even go anywhere, and that's part of some of the reason why it didn't go anywhere. The reason why international partners are giving money to Liberia is because it's good. They're doing it at a high premium, right? They're doing it at a high premium. I mean, look at the interest rate, 17.3% on a $1.5 billion debt. How long are you going to take to pay that debt, right? And these are some of the things. This is why I like going in this budget, making sense of the numbers and really breaking down the nitty gritty things that people don't talk about, or the things that should be talked about, but we don't talk about, right? This is what we say when we come on the show and say Liberia is in a crisis. We're not just exaggerating. These are the facts, the data that we look at to say this country is in a what do we call abyss, right? A bottomless pit, bottomless pit that we're in. And how do you get us out of this, right? Let me give you a perfect example. The finance minister of Ghana restructured their debt, right? The high interest rate debt. He restructured it, right? Restructuring meaning that you borrow money at a cheap rate to pay off the high interest rate debt, right? While you're servicing the existing debt, now maybe give it 2 or 3 years, you will now have paid down part of that debt to now go back on the global market if you want to raise bond. If you go back with that level of profile, international company, even investment fund, sovereign wealth fund will now want to take a look at your bond that you're issuing, right? Yes, because you don't have a credit rating, the premium might be high. It might still be considered junk or BB status, right? But at least you still have that ability to be able to raise money on the capital market, right? But in our case, we're not even close to that. We can't even raise bonds in the country to say, let's raise it within our citizen. The Liberian citizen will buy it, and we can earmark it for infrastructure, the healthcare, or the tourism for whatever reason, and they're going to buy that. We cannot do that, right? And this is the reason why I like talking about the budget, right? Making sense of these things. Another aspect of the this budget I like to talk about is the expenses. Anthony, if you're on here, could you please pull down? No, I don't. That's not that one. Hold on, I will tell you which one it is. Okay, it's called classification of expenditure by functions of government. Voila, right? So this right here, again, I took it upon ourselves to actually create this slide right here. It gives you a complete breakdown of projection. We're looking at 2020. We're looking at the special budget part, and we're looking at the projection for 22 and 23, right? Look at everything your government spending budget on right now, the money on right now, right? General public services, right? In 2021, the budget 2020 was 222 million. I think Alex pointed out everything. If you look at the trend right there, everything is declining. Even the projector up to 2023, everything is declining. Again, if you want to put this country in the scope of to say if you're looking at it as a company, you go borrow with this level of profile where your revenue is consistently declining, right? I cannot, no international partner will look at you and say, I'm going to lend to this company or this country, right? And those who do will do so at a high premium, at a debt premium that you would not be able to, high credit card debt. That's pretty much how people who end up with high credit card debt, this is why they do, right? If you don't have a good credit score, you go borrow, they charge you the highest premium. And to the point you use that credit card, you're not able to pay back on that debt. You are trapped forever. But in the Liberian case, this is exactly what we're looking at here. I know Alex is back on, so I will let him come in.
Yeah, no, good job. Very, very good job. Again, it's something that we don't find our intellect and our political analysts talking about these things. In other words, they are very naive. They don't understand what's going on, because I'm very concerned with these numbers. Okay, you're borrowing at 17%, and the reason why they borrow at 17% is very simple. LA used to get a lot of money from the international. They used to supplement the budget. Okay, most of the countries used to take care of most of the facilities, the health, military, and so forth. When I got into power, most of those things were cut, and for good reasons. All right, they just didn't have they weren't able to make the case. International community is not just going to give you money because you're the next president of Liberia. It's something that you have to make a case. You got to have a good rapport, relationship. You can't put people at the bank and other places that have no ability to make a convincing case to international partners and expect to see a result. You got to have people that side. No, of his, but I can tell you, at least he understood the international, connect. So when they didn't kind of aid, and they, of course, the special drawings and other stuff was decreased. They're solving the problem now. We will create this treasury, and we lend it to the local banks, and we'll raise that money domestically, which would be a good thing.
Right.
The interest rates were reasonable. The interest rate was 5%. So they were so desperate. In the expenditure, of course, you have $20 million presidential expenditure. Minister of State Presidential Affairs. Minister of State Presidential Affairs, spending $20 million. On what? I don't know. So these banks now saw it like a gravy train. We just milk it like the government. They want money, they're desperate, they can't get it anywhere. Whatever interest rate we charge them, we'll take it. So that's where the whole thing coming from with this domestic debt. It's between the bank, the first bank, and all these banks in Liberia. They get milking Liberian government because the guys are so desperate for money. Yeah,
Mr. Jones, for some reason, your voice is freezing. So I don't know if you can make adjustment at your end. So the quality of your contribution is not coming out at all. So make adjustment at your end and come back.
Anthony, I think we can, while we're waiting for Alex, maybe we can take some comments
all right
from the audience, and then we'll get on to the next probably couple of slides.
Okay. Yeah. There's this one.
All right. So the national budget is also a national value statement from Ben Na. Is that how you say it? Right. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Thank you, Ben. I absolutely agree with you. The next one. Is the budget actually appraised? I couldn't agree more with Mr. Gabriel. Yeah. Let's take the next one. Should corporations in Liberia, such as LPRC, the Port RIA, have obligation to job creation, contribute to the national development, etc.? Does the government have obligation to build headquarters for the NPA or continue to build out those institutions? Actually, that's a great question. Yeah. What's the governor work history, Mr. Carter? That's absolutely cool. Who's this guy? Billy Tay. Okay. Liberia is most cheaper. Huh, superlative verb there. All right. So I'll read it correctly. Liberia is cheaper than other countries, right? I did ship cars in Liberia 2017 and pay $850 US to free my car from the port. $1,200 for the shipper. That's not the case anymore. Please, next comment. Our country doesn't have an economic model. I absolutely agree. With short-term and long-term discipline creating growth development, we need to reform the economy from rent-seeking to industrial economics. Mr. Jackson, absolutely. Brilliant suggestion. The past and present administration takes the country as their private business. Anymore? If you are hired as finance minister, you will be more than those who we hear this all the time. You'll be more than those who are there. Haha, look at what he's saying. Okay. I would ask that you guys discuss the budget based on your professional expertise than to always politicize every discussion. Look at the budget, analyze it, point out the pitfalls, and give us solution. We're going to do that, Hamilton. We're going to do that. We didn't, let me just answer this question because it's so important. We're not just talking about the budget here, and this is what we're doing. It's kind of like a teachable moment, right? We're talking about those in politics, right? If you want to run for government, those are the things you'll be talking about. In addition of us talking about the budget, we're going to give our solutions as well. We're going to give suggestions. That doesn't mean that those suggestions will be taken, but at least from our expertise, we give recommendation on the budget as we discuss this as well. Yeah. Yes, we may have talked a little bit about politics, but I absolutely agree with you. Thank God that you guys are discussing this proposed budget. One doesn't know what goes in the making of a sausage, huh? and the devil being in the details. I agree with you. Carter, you are getting the whole debt debate wrong. Okay. If you do an comparative analysis on borrow of yesterday, borrow of yesterday and today, you will realize the monies borrowed today are used to finance the capital expenditure that are expected to increase revenue growth in the future. That's what it's supposed to do, but that's not what it's doing. Yesterday, monies that were borrowed were used to pay huge salaries to public officials, you're right. And the rest were pocketed, which made it difficult to pay back the debt owed to the past. The interest rate is high because of the payback, right? I agree, right? I think if we don't have any more comment, I would like to address the comments here, right?
Yeah, Gabriel, that's all the comments for now.
Okay, so first of all, the last comment, I absolutely agree with you. And this, I think I covered this earlier, right? So in whether it's you're looking at a multi-million-dollar company or you're looking at a country, right? The money you borrow, right? Matter of fact, when you go borrow money from anywhere, whether it's from a bank or sovereign wealth fund or international partner, first thing they'll ask you, from the gate, what are you going to do with that money? You have to have it earmarked, right? The things that I think I talked about this. The things you look at is, what are you going to do with that money? what are you going to spend it on, and how much return are you going to get for that money, right? So I agree with you. That's what it's supposed to do. But in our case, the unique case of Liberia, this is not what we're doing. This is not what we're doing, right? We're taking money, high interest rate at that, and we're spending that money on things on high salary. So we're not having any what we call return on equity capital invested to be able to service that debt that we're not taking back on. To go to Mr. Jackson's question, to move from rent seeking to industrialized,
okay, Dennis,
right? To move from rent seeking to industrialized country, this is what we're preaching about. And I think my co-host here, Alex, talked about that, right? Liberia is a rent-seeking country. I agree with you. Matter of fact, most countries in Africa, we're not an industrial country. We're not even in the first or second or third industrial country. We are far behind, right? So this is why we're rent-seeking, right? And the push here is that we move to industrialization. And I think Alex talked about that too, to have production, to have company in Liberia producing, right? We import everything that we consume in our country, down to the mean staple, which is rice. We import it. So I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Jackson, that we need to leave from rent seeking. I'm glad to have somebody in the audience who understands those kind of things, from a rent seeking to gradually maybe into industrialization.
Yeah, Gabriel.
Yeah.
Gabriel and Alex, I know I'm in the background, but I have a question.
Yes.
The way, from the look of the budget, you look it up. In every budget, especially in the case of Liberia, should a greater percentage of the budget be going to investment so as to grow the economy and spark, huge economic growth? What percentage of the growth, should be directed to investment? That's my question.
That is a great question. Alex, you want to take a stab?
Yes, and answer to that is yes. And the investment, I know in the budget they have investment in health or education. That's not really investment. Investment doesn't mean that you putting money in the budget to pay teachers. What it means is that you're putting money to build new schools, or to build new facilities, or to invest in computerized systems, something that wasn't there before. So if you look at our budget, there's no investment. There's just recurring budget, meaning just to take care of the basic bare minimum. So most of the money, so we should be spending about 20% of our budget, ideally, not less than 20% for the next 5 years on strict investment.
Yeah.
And that investment is not going to yield any kind of return today or tomorrow. And that's why I disagree with the ANC proposal and going into things like you call eco-tourism. I agree that's a good thing, that you can invest in eco-tourism. But if you start to invest in eco-tourism, you're not going to see any return this year, next year, or perhaps the next 2 3 years. And typically, Ghana, people look at Ghana, say, oh, Ghana, look at Ghana, or they look at Rwanda. But they don't see what is that Ghana and Rwanda has investing in these infrastructure, in these different sectors, education, healthcare, for the last years. So if you want to treat it today, you should have planted the seed 10 years ago.
Yeah. Let me add to that. Let me add a little bit to that. Anthony, that is, I think those are some of the questions we would rather be having from the audience. Absolutely, right? As Alex rightly pointed out, at least 20% of every dollar you have, 20 cents of every dollar you have, whether you borrow it or you have it from revenue, you should allocate that towards investment. In our case, right now, the budget is only 29 million allocated towards investment, right? So let me give you a scenario here. I think this could be true or I could be wrong here. What I usually hear is that LOFA is a breadbasket of Liberia, right? And some people would say that's not only LOFA. Bond County is also a good, produce place. It's another breadbasket. If we were investing, let's say for every budget we get, every dollar we get, we allocate that, we earmark it toward, let's say, infrastructure. Let's say we go to our international partner. We said we want 100, let's say 50 billion. That 50 billion, what we're going to do with it, we have mapped out entire road system across the country, and we want to start investing in that, right? Because we know low-fat, bong, or whatever else we call the bread basket, we know that those people that are producing in those counties cannot just sell to those in those very respective counties. We know that they also need access to bigger market, let's say the Monrovia and other places, or even international places where they can sell. But we know what without the infrastructure, we know they don't have access, right? So that all those things that they're producing, everything will go to waste. So in that case, we go to our international partner. We made a plan. We said, this is what we need that 50 billion for. We're going to map out the entire road system. You build a road system, right? That you invest in that road system. If you want, you can even start putting tolls on the road now, right? Because you now made it easy for people to travel. So that 50 billion that you invested, you got to start getting it back somewhere. You start looking at your taxes. I don't know if we have real estate taxes or income taxes, how to now start making money to pay back that debt. And we know because of the infrastructure that we've now built, people are going to be able to move from place to place in the country. Now, the access, not just access to capital, but access to market now, right? Those are some of the things that we're talking about. And I absolutely agree with you. At least 20 cents for every dollar should be earmarked to investments. Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, the missing piece. You understand? All right. You cannot expect an orange tree to grow apples. It's easy to tell people, I hear some of these political analysts and some of these politicians talking, oh, we need to invest in this, we need to invest. The problem here, you do not have the expertise. You do not have the expertise in Liberia to start a lemonade company. Show me one Liberian company in Liberia that has a well-structured, well-organized management system. You don't. So how are you going to invest in mechanized farming? You think you're going to bring aliens from Mars to kind of run it? You need people to run it. And part of the investment that I think Liberia should be making is to be making in the human capital. And unfortunately, Liberia does not invest in human capital.
Expand on that.
And Alex, let me throw a question in there before you continue.
Yeah.
The point you're raising about investing in human capital, everybody will agree with you if they understand, what you're talking about.
Yes.
So tell me, investing in human capital has to be specific, looking at Liberia's current situation, something that will lead to economic growth and viability. How and where can that be done?
So you see, right now we have 2 universities in Liberia, maybe 3. Tottenham, if you add Tottenham University, but you got Universal Library, you got Connington, right?
Right.
You have a lot of students there that are accounting students, that are management students, that are economic students. Half of these students, or 90% of these students, cannot even read the financial statement. Okay, if you give them a balance sheet and say analyze this balance sheet, they don't even know, right? Because they're just doing theories.
Okay.
They're just reading from books. So part of that investment will come. You collect these students from the university business school. Okay, you put about $10 million into 10, 15, whatever amount of money every year, and those funds, right, will be managed by those students. They will go out and get into small businesses. They will have funding, right? And that's how then you bring people like Carter now, who has the experience, the people who claim to have the what you call Larry Kennedy's, and you supervise them. You let them know this is how you run a business. Let me see your budget. Let me see your advertising budget. Let me see your revenue for last quarter. Okay. And that's investing in human capital. So when you start to build your mechanized farm in Lofa County, you already have someone who's been trained in Monrovia or in Bon County who can be the CFO of the company.
But Alex, let me interject. What you're saying is true, right? But that sounds like a long-term goal. I know people criticize short-term, but short-term becomes necessary, especially in our situation. You know very well we are in an economic crisis.
Yes.
So you have to have a short-term solution. So what can be a short-term solution as you work on the long-term solution for the people to be in a much better place, to carry on their economic activities?
And I've written about it before, and I think it's one of the goals and mission of the movement. First thing you have to do, and Ellen missed this point. She missed it by a mark. You collect all of your financial, your economic professionals from around the world. Whether virtually, doesn't mean that somebody has to be in Monrovia to work in Monrovia. There are people who are working for the UN in Liberia. They've never been to Liberia. But every year they receive the report.
No, Alex, I want you to place your answer, on the current marketers.
I'm telling you, okay. So if I was advising
the current short term, why you work on the long term?
If I was advising a political leader today or president-elect today, the first thing I would tell you, right? Create a database.
Okay.
Create a database. Get all the names of all your Liberian experts, whether they live in Ghana, they live in Australia, anybody who have had about 2 to 3 years, real practical experience. Get their names, get their number, get them on the phone. Okay? So that means you're talking about marketing people, you're talking about accountants, there are different layers of accountants. There's financial accounting, there's managerial accounting. People who into economics, business economics, different kinds of financial people, bankers, financial analysts. You get all of them on the phone. You put them into a group and they start to meet maybe 2-3 times a week, virtually, and those in Monrovia. And they start now to look at the budget. They start to look at the current Liberian.
Alex, you're still talking about the planning phase of it, and I'm all for that. What I'm saying is, somebody in real land now is more like the person driving the engine of the economy. You need a short term while you work on a long term. What can what will you propose for somebody in Guadalajara market, at Wallasa and real land right now to get the economy going?
Yeah, but Sonny, here's the problem, and let me just, I'll get there. The problem in Liberia is there is no short-term boost. There's no miracle. There's no economic miracle you can perform to get somebody from real away. We're all first understanding the situation.
Hey, Alex, I'm for that, but that's why you have now. How do you read?
Let me answer that question. Let's give.
Gabriel, come in, man.
The beauty of Liberia, even though in that chaos, is that the beauty of Liberia in that chaos is that we have those systems in place, Anthony. We have what we call, it's like we don't want to compare, we don't like to compare ourselves to the US, but every system that the US has, we do have, right? We have in the USA, they have what's called the SBA, the Small Business Administration. In Liberia, we do have similar structure, right? We still have that.
Yeah, we continue to hear about a liberalization policy, Gabriel.
Yeah, so let me tell you, and that's one of the things that it's kind of like a quagmire, right? Meaning that so let me end that, and I will pick up on that liberalization. So we have that structure, right? Is it being funded? Is it being utilized? Are people, let's say, technically what the SBA structure is, Alex, is, well, I work in the bank. As I said, I manage millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in companies, right? So what it is that, let's say you, Anthony, let's say I will put you in a typical Liberian man scenario. You run a shop in red light right now, but you say, you want to buy more goods, right? And you come to us, you go to a bank, you said, you go to the LB, you go to LBDI, you spoke to a banker, they say, Anthony, please, you don't have enough collateral, right? You say, okay, do you guys have the SBA program? The government, what the government would do, they guarantee half of that money. Let's say if you were taking 5,000 out, the government can either guarantee 2,500, and the bank take the other risk on the other 2,500. So hypothetically, what that means, if you default, let's say you don't pay back that $5,000, the bank is only off the hook for 2,500. They're only losing 2,500, right? The government will be responsible for the other 2,500. Even though that is risky, what that does is that it put the incumbent on the banks to make sure that they do the underwriting right, and that means that, hey, I will have to know Anthony very well. I know this guy. He goes, even though he's not doing so well, but he's consistent. He's been doing this for years. I know people that he know even in our context that he won't default on his loan, right?
Gabriel,
Yeah.
Gabriel,
That won't work, bro.
others have suggested, Gabriel, others have suggested that, hey, why don't the government make available certain amount of money through the financial banks, all right? So the financial bank is only managing it, thereby making the interest rate low, and it's all intended to empower the person in real life. I mean, is
Right.
that a good idea? If
That
yes,
is-
how?
That is a great idea. That's what I'm getting to, right? If you're doing that, you are now helping those people in those very predicament. But we have the SBA system there, but nobody's leveraging it. I don't even know if it's even
Carter, the first question you gotta ask Anthony, or Anthony recognize is, where would the government get the money from?
That's what I'm getting to now, right? The system is there, but then I don't know if they're even funding that SBA portion of it to say that, and they're encouraging businesses to go into that to be able to.
The government is broke, Carter. The government is borrowing from the commercial bank in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every year. How would the government take the money it's borrowing at 25% and then take it and say, okay, no, we're going to give you it back at lower interest rate? It makes no economic sense.
I know that, and that's what I'm getting to. So, Anthony, to answer your question, that is a great suggestion, and we do have those systems in place to if we do, apply those systems that we have in place. We have the SBA system, we have commercial banks, 9 commercial banks, and we have other savings and loan, right? We need to create other intermediaries, financial intermediaries, to like you said, to jumpstart the economy, because you're right, we're at a standstill right now, right? We're falling down in this pit, right? The reason why I think to answer the other question about librarianization, the reason why sometimes I get kind of squeamish about that. So this is what it is. And again, this is a catch-22, right? You put a select group of sectors aside. You said this is for Liberian people. No other foreigner can touch it. But yet then still, you're not giving Liberian people money to operate in those sectors. So you just tied up the sector that nobody's operating in, but then the foreigners who have the money to operate in it, they can't do anything about it, right? They can't touch it. But the Liberian people that are supposed to go in this sector and operate there, they don't have access to capital to operate in that sector. So you just have this sector sitting there that nobody's investing in, right? And let me say one more thing before I yield here. On the ecotourism that Mr. Cummings keep pushing. I think the reason why he keep pushing that is that's the low hanging fruit. We all know, right? Ecotourism, you don't need structures. It's easy to do. You can get people money. People come into that's if you have the infrastructure for them to get to this place to explore those, those safaris and wildlife places, right? That's the low hanging fruit. That's like something what you do to say, okay, let me eat this apple here while the dinner is cooking, while I'm cooking dinner, or let me eat this gari with milk while the dinner is being cooked, right? I think that's the reason why that is being suggested.
All right. Gabriel, hold on, Alex. Before you come in, Alex, let me read something for you, then you can comment on it, Alex. Musu is busy here. She's in a conversation here. Let me read what she wrote here. She said the budget for infrastructure can be projected for many years. It takes time to even conduct research analysis before even starting the project. That's her first comment. Now she came by and said the curricula at most of these institutions are absolute. No practical exposure to understand what's happening in the developed world. Now, the question I asked earlier, she gave an answer, and that's the main one I want you to comment on. Alex, you said, no, that's not the one. Oh, okay, yeah, it is. She said to respond to answering question directly, there's no structure available in Liberia currently to address the problem. But Gabriel said there's structure, but the structure is not being followed. Alex, to you, do you agree with Musu or you agree?
Yeah, I agree. There's no structure. There's actually no structure. There's no capacity because
there's structure, but there's not capacity.
Yeah,
structure is there, but we don't have the capacity. We don't have the fund. Right.
So what am I saying here? Okay, you have the Bureau of State Enterprise in Liberia. Okay, that's the bureau that's responsible to manage all of the semi-autonomous agency. Okay, if that bureau is that, and that's the least funded bureau in Liberia, I think they get $84,000 a year. Okay, in China, that's the bureau, the same similar bureau that control the China Construction Bank, the Import-Export Bank, the China Agricultural Bank. These are the largest banks and institutions in the world. These are the institutions that create billions of dollars for Chinese government. What they do now, they take money from the government, right? And they invest that money into different sectors, oil, agriculture, construction, different stuff. And the returns on it, one, they create employment, two, they create foreign exchange, three, they expand their own markets, they create manufacturing. In Liberia, nobody even know the function of the Bureau of State Enterprise. And they shut it down. He doesn't even know what the function of it. To where they're sitting down. So if that bureau, for instance, was active, where you had where I alluded to earlier, bring your best financial analysts, economists, all these people together. For instance, put them at that bureau, okay? And then you can give them the task of now looking into Liberia, the low-hanging fruit, because according to Carter, the low-hanging fruit is ecotourism. I disagree. But you haven't done an analysis, market analysis. There is no empirical evidence to suggest that can create $500 million a year. I mean, what the next 4 to 5 years. So when that group is set in place, meeting on a weekly basis internationally, they would be the one now to say, okay, we can open a cement factory tomorrow in Liberia or in maybe Ghana, and that cement factory can hire 1,000 people. It can stop us from importing cement. It can grow the economy in Ghana and in Liberia by another maybe 5%. And we can bring Carter. He's the best person to manage it. Here's his resume. Let's get Carter on the plane. Let's get him there. Let's take $5 million from a consortium of banks. Let's get this going next week.
Gentlemen,
have that kind of
gentlemen, to the both of you, this is what Musu is saying. She's taking it from the practical side here. If I'm understanding where she's going with this in the other dimension, she said there has to be a dominance of Liberian businesses in a certain sector before it qualifies for protection, or else there will be a shortage of goods and services. Carol, let me bring you in. Do you agree here?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So, and this is why sometimes, yes, I understand what they wanted to do with the whole Liberianization, right? But then again, it's a catch-22, right? You want to put these sectors aside. Say we don't want any foreigner touching it for Liberian people to invest in. That is great and all, well intended. But again, like she said, we do not have the people that are supposed to have. Liberian people don't have access to capital, and they're not in it. So in reality, what is happening now? You just tied up these sectors. Like let's say, foreigners have capital to invest in the sector, but they can't do that because it's tied up. So I absolutely agree with her, right? Let me give you a perfect example here. And this is why sometimes I agree with Alex that before you do something, you should do research, empirical data, let it be supported by that. In the US here, I always talk about this. The city that I grew up in here, Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? Even in New York, they attempted rent control. So rent control, it means that if you're in your apartment, the landlord cannot increase rent. If you hear rent control for a typical person in New York or in Cambridge, the rent is skyrocket. You think it's a beautiful idea, brilliant idea. But yeah, guess what? What you're doing? What you're doing now, you're disincentivizing developers, people that are builders from building properties. Because if they'll build those houses, they cannot rent it at the market rent that they want to rent it to. So even though it is intended for the right purposes from the onset, it might sound great that is a great idea. In reality, in practical, it is in the long-term standpoint, it doesn't make sense for your economy. This is exactly what she's speaking to. The industry setting aside is great for Liberian. I think we should do that. But if you want to do that, you have to give them access to capital for them to be able to function in those sectors and make sure that they take ownership of the sector. So I absolutely agree with that.
And that's Carter, and that's my frustration with Liberian people, to be honest with you. And that's why we're going nowhere. Everybody just wants to be president. Everybody wants to be finance minister. Everybody think that by changing president, then you change the problem. That's not true. There's evidence that the bureau problem is structural. It's constitutional, the way in which the system runs in Liberia. Let me give you an example. We're looking for money here. The Ministry of Finance on the special budget is getting $61 million. Okay, $61 million is going to just the Ministry of Finance and Development alone. Where is that money spent for? And there's a little breakdown if you can go. It says for financial budget and development planning, $500,000. For economic management, $34 million.
Yep.
Now you tell me, what kind of economic management going on in Liberia where they're spending $34 million, right, over the next 6 months? There is just massive corruption. And they say administration and management, another $25 million. Okay.
Alice, there's a critique here for you. Agatha Shelley says, Alice is just here for politics. It's not giving no analysis, meant to say not giving analysis to the discussion.
Okay.
What's your response?
So my response is
everything is
economics is politics. You're talking about the budget. The budget is a political issue. When you give $40 million to politicians, right, from the budget, that is an economic issue. That $40 million, you can take it and build. You can build stores, you can build housings, you can invest that money in sovereign wealth fund, even U.S. bond. But you're taking it and you're giving it to people who are going to contribute nothing to society. And you're asking yourself, oh, why Liberians are poor? Why our GDP negative? That's the reason. You have a politically dysfunctional society that is now has turned into an economic disaster. Why did I say the first thing any incumbent needs to do, or even now, they don't even need to get, or Liberians should get together, finance, economic managers, and start to look at these things and start to have a solution. How do you get Liberians to start running a Liberian institution, financial institution?
Right.
How do you get Liberians to start to incorporate, to form co-ops, to grow foods, and instead of talking about, giving agriculture to individuals, agriculture or financing to individuals.
And Alex, I know you're in speech. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Musu agree with you. She said, true. The national budget is definitely a political tool.
Yep.
So that's my point. I don't like politics, but if you're talking economics, you're talking the context, unless if we're talking business, then this won't be politics.
Right.
But you're talking about the budget. You're talking about where the president and the executive has the right to say they are giving $34 million to a bunch of idiots who will contribute nothing to the Liberian economy. Nothing, absolutely nothing. The GDP is negative 3%. And last year, you know how much they gave to those people? $107 million for economic management. The year before that, it's right there.
And Gabriel, let me bring you in here. Baton Kula say, focus on Liberia. Can those guys not put money into the stock market to help them pay salaries on time? Gabriel, you respond to that.
Well, I don't think I understand the question.
I think he's wondering whether or not the government of Liberia is struggling with raising revenue, and because of that salary delay, whether they can put money in the stock market and maybe what they earn from it and use it to pay salaries on time. If I'm understanding him here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what he intended. I won't advise for that to happen because the stock market is very risky. This is why, if you look. Right now, there's Rwanda just started a sovereign wealth fund. Nigeria has a sovereign wealth fund, right? Those are money put aside to invest on behalf of the country, right?
All right. I think he modified his statement. He said instead of put, but he just say invest.
Yes.
Is that any different?
Yeah, that's perfectly what he meant, right? And the reason why I wouldn't advise him to put money directly in the stock market is, well, you can do it, but not directly to just say, hey, we're going to invest in the stock market as a way to pay our salary. You create a sovereign wealth fund, but in our case, we're not there yet. We don't even have budget surplus to say, okay, we're having budget surplus year over year. So now let's figure out what we want to do with this budget surplus. Oh yes, let's create a sovereign wealth fund for the country, that's going to take care of social security for people that are retiring. That's going to look at supplementing the budget in case there's a budget shortfall, right? And to look at even using the proceeds from that to look at to fund long-term infrastructure needs, right? I won't directly agree with putting the money in a stock market, but looking at eventually creating a sovereign wealth fund would be a great idea, because a lot of countries are doing that. Nigeria just has a wealth fund. I think Ghana does. Rwanda just hired the ex-CEO of Credit Suisse to lead theirs. So I think that is a brilliant idea, but not directly to invest in the stock market to pay salaries. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I want you to respond to Hamilton. And I think it's a question or so. He said, can you guys give me the percentage that goes for each of these in the budget? Recurring, number 2, capital investment, 3, debt. And Gabriel, according to our research note here, let me share that, and then you can respond to him, and then Alice can chime in also. Let me show it quickly here. Here we go. All right, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So the recurring budget is, what is it? I think that might be lower. The 272 million, right? That's revenue on top. So
Okay.
I think 40 something. I can't do the math in my head right now, right?
Okay.
But I think that's the revenue. That's the revenue. I know $29 million goes into investment, right?
Right.
$29 million investment. Recurrent expenditure, I think, is about around 54% or 60%, right? So that means all the money we're getting, everything gets on salary, expenditure. So most of it actually in short term, to cut it short, most of it goes to salaries, right? We only spent 29 million of that budget, which is a fraction on investment. This is why I think we talked about earlier that the government isn't serious about investment. They're just getting money from tax allocation and then spending money. So pretty much what you do, you work for your money, you get a wage, and then you go buy clothes, you go buy all kinds of things, you buy food. You're not thinking about your future. You're not thinking about retirement. So that's exactly what the government is doing. Yeah.
Let us not mislead. When you see it for reinvestment, it's not capital investment. I don't see anywhere in the budget where money is actually allocated for investment.
There is. So it's called
they call it investment.
It's called private public investment, right? Where they spend $8 million, I think $9 million on roads. I think the slide that Anthony just shared actually breaks that down, right? That 29 million, they're spending 9 million
You can't
on roads.
You can't. How can you take road construction to be an investment?
It is an investment.
What's the return rate on road construction?
We can quantify that.
But it's not a capital investment.
Now, if you're looking at investment in the private sector, if you're looking at investment in the private sector, that's
no. I was.
You're breaking in.
Infrastructure, you can say it's an infrastructure investment, but the investment we're talking about is, but I think the gentleman is asking for, it's like what Carter said, if you invest in the stock market at a certain percentage, certain yield, or the bond market, right? But when you look at infrastructure investment, it's almost like it's almost like a grant. It's not expected to yield any kind of capital return within the next economic return, maybe in the future.
I would disagree with that. And the reason why is because I think from a long-term standpoint, it may not be immediate. It may not have an immediate return, but it does have a long-term return in the economy, in the area where those roads are being built, right? So in terms of, as I said earlier, access, giving people access to market, right?
But then my argument would be, any bill, hundreds of kilometers of roads, why did that decline? Why didn't after 10 years, why that bill economy?
Okay, here's the thing. If we want to critique two administration, we can do that, right? But here's the thing. Even though she did that, I don't know if they really did that strategically. to say, I think one of the things they should have done is, as I said earlier, Lo-Fi is your breadbasket county. You're supposed to have a road directly from Monrovia to Lo-Fi where people can bring stuff in and out without, where they can. You produce a lot in Lo-Fi. You want people to have access to what is being produced in Lo-Fi. Now, did they look at that when they were planning out the roads? I don't think they did. So they may have built a lot of roads, but they weren't key area that would have a long-term effect on the country. But road within itself, infrastructure, they have a long-term economic impact on the country, which I think is true. But
not semantics. I'm not saying that Joe Biden $1 trillion infrastructure bill is not an investment in the American economy. But when we look at it from a budgetary standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from a rate or return standpoint, we cannot categorize investment into infrastructure, right, as a return investment. That's what I'm saying.
As a what?
As a return financial or capital investment into.
You can. The CDO does that. The CDO does that calculation.
Okay, so where the rate of return? If how you can use something saying what is the?
You can quantify that if you go on the what is it called, the CDO or CBO. Congressional Budget Organization, right? They do the.
But if they could do that, if they could quantify the rate of return on, if they put $8 million a year, on rules, and if they're spending $62 million on financial management, right?
That's
so
what
that's
I'm
like
saying.
And tell me what is the rate of return on the rules?
That's what I'm saying. They're not quantified. That is not being quantified, and I don't even think they're looking at it from that standpoint to say we can quantify this amount of money we'll put in on roads. So
it's a nuisance.
They're not quantifying. If we're looking at roads,
it does not make Liberian budget does not make any sense because you are borrowing at a higher rate. Even if the road increase the return was 10% every year, okay, you're still paying 17%, right, net, right, on debt. So how does that make sense? So every year, right, there is what you got 10% negative you kept every year. Even if you you understand what?
Let me answer that question.
Huh?
From an adequacy standpoint, that amount is not enough. And then if you're looking at whether that capital being deployed into the infrastructure makes sense in terms of the level of interest rate that is charged on that, whether it makes sense, I will agree with you. It doesn't, because that level of capital being deployed, especially for a 5 million population country, right? It doesn't make sense. It's just
a political
drop in the bucket. Right?
I know the only reason that Josh Weah is building rules so that he can campaign and say, "Oh, I build rules." The other reason is so that they can siphon the money from the rules to contractors. There's no real audit that's done. Most of the rules in Liberia, they say $1 million per mile. Can you believe that? It's higher than anywhere probably in the world.
Yeah.
So it's just a way, it's a political move. And that's the problem in Liberia. And the previous government did the same thing too. They were building these roads, not out of economic sense, but they were building it as a political project. It just when Bill Jones went out and started giving money to market women. Bill Jones, as a central bank governor, were not funding Liberian industries or mechanized farming or Liberian manufacturing, but our market women, right? That is federal, the central bank, okay, will give loans to and make it dumb. I don't even know how to describe that scenario. Some of the foolishness.
It goes back to the crux of our problems in the country, Alex, and the audience listening. That's the crux of the problem in our country. We put people in place who we perceive as having the knowledge, but in practicality, they don't know it. I agree with you. No central bank governor should be go giving out money literally to market women. This is why you have the central bank, you have the commercial bank, you have the savings and loans, you have people finance institutions. you should create a system where they're connected, they're interlinked, and you give those money to those institutions, and those institutions carry those duties, and you make sure you mandate them to report to you either quarterly or semi-annual or even annually, to make sure that whatever capital you've allocated to them to carry out those to do that is actually being effective, right? But in reality, in Mel Jones' case, he directly just went and started giving market women. Now, if you go talk to those market women doing political,
or Samuel Twer taking $25 million and giving it.
Right. If you go talk to those market women doing
Samuel Twer taking $25 million getting money change.
They will hold flags in their hand and say, "Oh yeah, this is the guy. He's doing right for us." But in reality, he's messing up the rest of the country, right? The same thing with Samuel Twer, right? I don't like talking about the guy, but what if? Again, I always talked about this. Our infrastructure, in terms from a financial standpoint, it is not there. The central bank and the commercial bank do not have that interlink. Whether the savings loan, the microfinance institution, they don't have that interconnection and that structure. This is why Samuel Twer, went and took the $25 million and started giving it to money changers. Exactly the same thing that his Mel Jones did to give market women money. Now, we know what happened. We know what happened to that. There's no data for you to track that. You give somebody money at a market change, at a money changing place. How are you going to assess whether that money goes back into the economy? How are you going to assess that, right? And again, in our case, we don't have people. So stuff like that happening would come and make noise about it, but it's not an actual audit that goes on to hold these people accountable, to make sure that, hey, you mess up here, you should be held accountable for it, right? So our financial system, it's when I use the word broken, maybe people would think when I use the word broken is an understatement. You have to really understand Liberia financial market, or how financial market work, to know that we do not have a financial market in Liberia. Whether you're looking at the way they're being regulated, whether even the central banks is even regulating these commercial banks and banking institutions in the country, or whether they're making sure people within the country are having access to capital, right? Access to capital, meaning that, if I go borrow, I have my collateral, you should be able to give me money. If I meet your lending regulations, you should be able to give me the money. Disregard the fact that people are saying Liberian people don't pay back money, right? That is great. We have those regulations in place. How is that being enforced? Are these central banks, commercial banks, being mandated to report those data to the central bank? Before I went into corporate credit, I was working in compliance, right? Those are the type of things we're monitoring, right? We report them to the government on a quarterly basis, every 3 months. In the States here, if a bank is operating in, let's say, in a very dangerous community, if they have a branch there, they're mandated by the law to make loans to people in that community, right? So that meaning you cannot be operating within that community, taking deposits and then making loans to wealthy communities, right? So we have that regulation in place. I'm sure we have those regulations in Liberia, but we have to make sure that they're being enforced. Even if they're being enforced, how do we track that? Right? The central bank doesn't do anything. This is why, I agree with Alex when he said that we need the governor to be making policy statement, or maybe every 3 months or every 6 months, give people the idea of how the economy is doing. Business people depend on these things. If you're telling me the inflation rate ran down and I go buy 2 container of goods, I say, okay, I'm going to make money on my margin here and bring it and come to find out, I get to the point and realize I have to pay all these exorbitant amount of money to clear those things. You just misled me, right? Mm-hmm. You just misled me, and I'm going to take a big loss on that, right? And this is why we need the guy to be coming out every 3 months. Tell people how the economy is doing, how the interest rate is, how you're improving on the economy, right? So I agree with you on that.
And gentlemen, Alex and Gabriel, I'm enjoying the conversation, and you both know I'm not a student of business, but one, profound understanding I have is politics can develop Liberia. It has to be business. It has to be investment, and that I understand profoundly.
Hallelujah!
But, yeah,
hallelujah.
Every good thing must come to an end, will be here next Saturday, same
Yes.
time. We Liberians need to understand that if Liberia is to be strong, it has to be business, it has to be economics, it has to be investment, it has to be in the people. It has to be in the infrastructure of the country. It has to be sector by sector, and that's the only way we'll have a country. But the
Absolutely.
noise about this person is good, this person is bad, it gets us nowhere.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, I will take your closing statement. Times if I spend. Let me start with Mr. Alex Chuchu Jones. Mr. Jones.
Well, again, it's always a pleasure to discuss economics because it hits the heart of everything in Liberia. And unfortunately, the people who are talking, they're not talking any sense. So that's why we're here. We'll be here next week. Hopefully, we'll get all the technical issues. We'll bring more people as well.
Right.
But I'll leave with this departing statement. If you don't get the right economists, financial managers, bankers, Liberians now on the ground for the next decade or two, no matter who you make president, Liberia will still decline. Liberia will still be a failed state. You don't need this. You don't even need democracy for economic development. As we can see in China, we can see in many parts of the world. You do need technocrats. You do need people who understand how to manage economy, know a little bit of something about it. They may not know all about it, but I'd rather have a guy who have a little knowledge of something like Carter than to have a guy like Luscious who has no idea, because you only have decline, you only have more suffering, and it's sad that you have people and we're using incompetence to run the country. Thank you.
That is the voice of Mr. Chuchu Alex Jones. He's a business analyst. He will be here next Saturday, same time here at Focus on Liberia. And we'll continue on the subject of the budget and how we can use it to build a country we can be proud of. Gabriel?
Yeah, no, thank you again. Alex. Thank you again for being a co-host. I know we've been away from this thing for quite a bit, but hopefully we'll continue this. This is a very important segment that I think we need to be talking about. I always want us to talk about the budget, everything economics, and I think Anthony, you said it right. Politics cannot build Liberia. It has to be business, and this is what I want us to take home. Right, we have to create a country that is business friendly. Right, where people can, if I have an idea, you have an idea, you can pitch it to somebody that invests in you, and if they believe that is a great idea, you can get access to capital, get access to the market, and be able to start your business. Right, on the budget part of it, we want to make sure that we know what is existing right now doesn't work. Right, and I'm actually appealing to the various political party people that are running. Put a budget together, put an economic plans together, right? Because we don't want this is to be a learning opportunity. We don't want what is happening right now to be repeated, when people, we have the next administration. So again, it's a pleasure being on the show. We will be here next week to talk about the, a continuity, maybe the part 2 of the budget. Maybe again, we will do a deep dive. To the audience, I think you guys were brilliant. This is probably the most knowledgeable audience we've had in a long time. You guys are asking the right question. We want you guys to be on the show. Ask a lot of questions. Write your question down. We will be on the budget next week. So think about all the questions you want to ask and present it here next week as well. Again, we look forward to having you guys here. And it's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you.
And gentlemen, I will allow Musu to close the show today. She wrote, and try to avoid increasing the national debt. It's killing us. That could not be more profound, gentlemen. That could not be more profound. Followed by saying, great discussion. The more we brainstorm, the better.
Yeah. Can you see if Musu can join us sometimes? Because I think
yes, we will talk to Musu. She's family here, Focus on Liberia. I don't think she will hesitate to come once. That will not be in conflict with her schedule. And Dave Jha also said infrastructure development without creating a great human capacity that has spending powers, it is useless. This is how we will come to the end of yet another edition of FOL Marketplace. That is FOL Business and Economic Forum. I'm Anthony C.A. I joined these gentlemen at a late hour to close the show. The songs that says we are all Liberians is taking us home. Gentlemen, next Saturday, this time, I will not a business student. I'm coming with my wacky questions so that I can get an understanding. Thank you, gentlemen.
Please do. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people.
Baby, go to bed, I don't need your tabata.